This is about leadership. It's about work-life integration. It's about integrating the different parts for mutual gain, but it starts with the concept of leadership. When I ask you this question, what occurs to you? Let's hear the word or phrase that pops into your head when you think, what kind of leadership do we need now? We in this world, in this society, in this room.
Integrity.
Integrity. All right.
Sound judgment.
What does integrity mean to you? In a word or phrase or a sentence.
Values-based.
All right, so values-based, yes.
Sound judgment.
Sound judgment about all matters in life, I'm sure, not just technical, and all right, being able to make important decisions based on useful knowledge, relevant knowledge. Yes, Meredith?
Global perspective.
Global perspective, seeing the whole. What else comes to mind? Participative, someone who engages all the people. Yes. What else? Passionate. Inspirational. Where does passion come from? Well, passion comes from the things that we care about, right? Inspiration comes from being able to express what it is that you care most about, because that's what other people want from you, is to hear your story, to hear what you're most passionate about. That's what people are inspired by. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next half hour or so and what that means for you. Again, I'm hoping that you're thinking here about what these ideas mean for you, because I want you to come away from this time together with an idea that you can actually use. What else comes to mind when you think about what kind of leadership is needed now?
One that encourages people to go and try for it. And no fear of failure.
All right. Rewarding just trying, and failure as much as success. Sir?
What's best for the organization as a whole, not just the leader?
All right. Looking beyond just the selfish view and seeing the collective and serving the collective purposes. Let's hear one more. Yes? Empowering others. All right. We could spend the rest of our time together on this question, and in a sense we will, but let me just backtrack a little bit further here and give you a little bit of the context and why this model of leadership from the perspective of the whole person makes sense for our world today. It has to do with the kinds of things that you were just saying here. The world that I grew up in and the world that you grew up in is clearly a very different world than the one that we're living in today. And yet a lot of the mental models of leadership that we carry with us, that we learned growing up, they reside still in our consciousness, and they shape how we think about what leadership is or should be. And that's a mistake, because the world is radically different. There are some verities of leadership that will never change, and that have always been true as long as human society has existed. But there are aspects of how it plays out in the world today that we need to be conscious of and to think differently about what that means for us as leaders, as educators of leaders, as I take all of us to be in this room. We're all leaders here, and we're all teachers of leaders. What's changed? Well, just very, very briefly, let's look. Let's look at the social landscape. How have things changed? If you look at the structure of the family. Today in America, there are more mothers who are single than married, under 30. More mothers who are single than married, under 30. One of the questions that we asked our students back in 1991, the undergrads when they graduated, and then that we asked of the graduating class in 2012 was this one. Do you plan to have children? Yes, maybe, not sure, probably not, no. All right, so in 1992, what percentage of the Wharton undergraduate class answered yes to that question? You can't answer, Hannah, because you know the answer if you read that personal time capsule.
75.
It was 80%, and it was 79, and it was the very same for men and women. 78, 79 was the exact same. Class of 2012. These are the 22-year-olds just graduated. Same question, how many said yes? 42%. Right? What does that tell us about what has changed? A lot. We're not going to dig into all the sociological implications, but I just want to throw out some things just to shake up your thinking about what kind of world we're leading in today. Just another piece from that study. We asked people, how many hours a week do you expect to work? So again, this is Wharton undergrads, 1992. How many hours per week do you think they, on average, said that they expected to work? 56. All right. 2012? 70. And I think that's the preponderance of investment banking and consulting. And that has to be it. Things are shifting a lot in the social landscape. Those are just a couple of little tidbits. We look at the values that people have. One of the great benefits that I have in being at Wharton for so long is that I get to see change. And I ask people all the time about what they care about. Because it's the most important question, I think, to ask. What do you really care about? And so I've been asking questions like this, and I've probably asked some of you questions like this over the years. One of the questions I've been asking is about whether you expect to work in the same company when you graduate as when you retire. So back in the day, 30 years ago, Wharton MBA, typical class, what do you think the percentage of people saying, yeah, that's my plan, same company all the way? It was about 70%. Right. Now, when I asked that very same question of a group of MBA students in the full-time program in Philadelphia not too long ago, about 70 of them, I said, how many of you plan to work in the same company when you graduate as when you retire? How many hands do you think went up? 0. Well, there were 2. And they were both heirs to major fortunes. Right. So there's all kinds of shifts in how people think about what matters in the workforce. There are many, many more people in our MBA program now who are really interested in devoting their lives and careers to healing the broken world around us. So many more than when I first began. There is a huge social impact interest now. And indeed, that's one of the pillars of our school. It's because we're responding to the marketplace, where students are coming in saying, I want to get the tools so that I can make the world better somehow. It's true. It's happening in a big way. We just today got a message from a group of students who are interested in values and making values the centerpiece of a Wharton education. And so they asked a couple of us, faculty, to lead a discussion about values and personal values. And they just put up a sign up for MBA students to join this conversation. 500 people signed up, which it's everywhere in our student population. So values are shifting. People want to have meaning. They want to contribute in some important way. The digital revolution, of course, has changed everything, as you all know, and as many of you are, of course, a part of that revolution, directly in terms of the products and services you create and provide. But it's really shifted everything about the way we communicate and the way we connect with the people who matter to us. So the whole issue of what you pay attention to, which I think is a critical leadership issue, what you choose to invest your attention in, is in some way the clearest signal as to what it is that you value, right? So how we get to the point of making intelligent choices about where we pay our attention, both physically and psychologically, because you can be physically present but psychologically absent. What did I just say?
Physically present, psychologically absent.
All right. You are both physically and psychologically present, obviously, because you heard what I said. Yeah, but so let me just check my email for a second. Oh, sorry. You would never do that, I'm sure. What was your gut reaction to my doing that just now?
Almost impolite and almost certainly not quite present.
Not quite present. Yeah, I know we live with this all the time now, but 5 years ago we didn't have this. So the remarkable power of the digital revolution, harnessing those tools, we're just figuring that out. Nobody knows where this is all going to go. And like most other technological revolutions in history, the tool arrives before the psychological and social knowledge to really use the tools to good effect without their killing us. That lags. And so we're just discovering. So all these things and globalization and so many other factors have really shifted the landscape of what kind of leadership we need now. And so that's what I'm here to kind of challenge your thinking about. What does leadership mean to you today? And what should it look like? And what I want to argue is that it's got to have a couple of these attributes. It has to be about leading people, mobilizing people toward a goal that matters to you personally, not just to your business. So that's one important piece. It's got to focus on results not just in one part, but in all the different pieces. And the pursuit of harmony among them must be a part of what it is that we seek as business leaders. It's about influence not just top-down, but in all directions, and again in all the different domains, as I call them: work, home, community, and self. And the three attributes, and this goes back to our research starting 20 years ago, that we've seen to be critically important are these: authenticity, being real, by clarifying what matters most to you, your values and your vision. Being whole, acting with integrity. The root of the word integrity is one, integer, right? So how do you bring together the pieces into a coherent whole? By respecting the whole. And finally, being innovative. Acting with creativity by continually experimenting with how things get done. These three principles and how they come to life is what I want to spend the rest of our time talking about here, because we found that, that they work and that they make sense in many different kinds of contexts, both in business and in society, and not just in this country. So it's about your whole life, not just about your work. All right, let's make this come alive for you personally. What I'm going to ask you to do is to take out a writing instrument, if you still have one. So many people don't have pens or pencils anymore. So if you don't, you'll have to do some imagining. But it's really important that you actually think through, if not compose a response. This is just a sliver of what the whole course and the whole book is about. But I think you'll find this to be fun and hopefully fruitful for you. All right, so what I'm asking you to do, again, this is really simple and it's just for you, is to think about work, home, community, and self. So you define subjectively however you want to think about these domains of your life, right? Whatever work means to you, whatever home means to you. I think if I took this first row and said define the word family, there's 10 people here, I'd probably get 11 different definitions. Family is whatever your family is. Community or society, that could be anything beyond the immediate circle of your family and your work. So your friends, your neighbors, your religious groups, political groups, your role as a citizen, whatever it is. And then self, again, is mind, body, and spirit. So in the first column, what I'd like you to do is take 100 points and divide them according to how important each of the different domains is to you right now, taking a little snapshot. All right? So if work is everything, so if your boss is sitting next to you, you'd have 100, 0, 0, 0. Or if your wife is sitting next to you, you'd have 0, 100, 0, 0. Whatever it is. If they're all equal, it's 25, 25, 25. And again, this is an artifice. It's a point of departure for thinking, reflection, conversation, and change. That's what all this is. It's a way of compelling you to reflect on things that you don't normally think about. All right, now think about where you focus your waking attention in a typical week. According to, again, the percentage of attention, of psychological attention you give to each of these different domains in a typical week. So now what I'd like you to do, I'll take this a little bit further. Think about your sense of well-being, your subjective sense of satisfaction with how things are going in each of the different parts. So the scale is from 1, I am not at all satisfied, things are terrible, to 10, I am fully satisfied, things could not be better. At work, at home, in the community, and for yourself personally. And finally, what I'd like you to do in the last column there is think about how you're performing against the expectations of other people, and then finally yourself. So for example, what's your name, sir?
Oh,
Ian. Okay, so Ian, let's say that I were to gather the 4 or 5 people at work who know you best. And I was to have a private and confidential conversation with each one of them, and I would say to them, tell me, how's Ian doing in meeting your expectations for his performance? On average, Ian, you don't have to answer this publicly, but on average, I want all of you to take the same question. What would they say? And it's probably something you probably have a pretty good idea about with respect to your work. So on average, what would they tell me on that scale? Now I want you to do the same thing and imagine the critical people in your home or family environment. People I call, in each of these different domains, your stakeholders, people who have a stake in your future. What would the 3 or 4 or 5 people in your home or family environment, however you define it, what would they say? And same for community and for yourself, your own goals, your own aspirations, your own objectives. How are you doing in meeting your own expectations for yourself? All right, so now you're probably all pretty depressed. Taking a look at your life. Oh. Well, I want you to talk about what you just wrote with somebody else in the room. Yes. A very brief, not too deep, 5-minute conversation. Somebody you don't know. Hang on, I have some ground rules. Ready? All right. So here's what I want you to do. First of all, privacy and confidentiality is the most important aspect of this exercise. So if you turn to your neighbor and say, okay, let's do this, I just want to talk about you, I don't want to talk about me. That's perfectly acceptable, although it's definitely suboptimal. So I hope you don't choose that strategy. I want you to talk, but you talk about whatever you want to, and if you don't want to talk about it at all, that is perfectly cool, don't worry about it. But the questions are these. What are the consequences of the choices you make about the focus of your attention in each of the different domains? And what is your single greatest challenge? One thing, not time. I want you to think beyond time, to other forces in your life, internal and external. What's the single greatest challenge you face in creating greater harmony among the different parts? And, bonus question, what one small step can you take, one teeny thing that's under your control that you could do like now, this week, that would better align what you care about with what you do and would have a demonstrably beneficial result for your satisfaction and performance in all 4 of the domains? That's the Holy Grail. Is it clear what I'm asking you to do? Yes. One-on-one, not a trio, not a quartet, just one-on-one, 5 minutes in this room. All right. All right, so how'd that go? What did you take away from this conversation? What did you take away?
I think it appears that people have seen a lot of similarities.
A lot of similarities. Now, that may not have been true universally here, but I hear that everywhere I go, that I'm not the only one with these challenges. And that's lesson number 1. Creating the conversation, creating an opportunity for people to talk about what really matters and start to work together to find solutions can be quite liberating of human energy and creativity. And it helps people to see that it's not their fault, that they're operating against a certain set of constraints that you need to take leadership action to to somehow overcome and to deal with. All right, so thank you for that. What other takeaways from your conversation? What did you discover? Sir?
While the earlier questions, we had fairly similar answers.
The key lesson here is there's no cookie cutter solution here. Anybody who tells you here's how to do work-life balance, they're wrong. Because there's no one solution that applies to everyone, and a critical aspect of liberating the leadership within each person is to help them figure out how to do it in a way that works for them, and how to integrate the different parts in ways that work for them. It's got to work for them and for their world, and everybody has a different take on what's required. So thank you for that. Other takeaways?
He has a very young child, a year and a half.
Right.
So home and family.
But the general point here is that, yeah, this stuff changes all the time, obviously, and the challenges are very different when you're young and as you grow. There's a group of retired Stanford professors who were reading my book, and these guys are in their 80s, and they do, leadership vision is one of the exercises. What are you going to be doing 15 years from now? And hopefully I'll be breathing is the answer. And so another key lesson here is that this is obviously an evolving puzzle that requires continual adjustment and active reflection. And what separates the good from the great leaders is the capacity to learn, the capacity to reflect on what has gone right and what has gone wrong, and to make adjustments accordingly. So there's a continual process of adjustment, and the more you engage the people around you, the people who matter most to you in all the different parts in that process of reflection and experimentation, the much more successful you're going to be in finding solutions that work for them and for you. So yeah, this changes over time. Let's take one more takeaway from the conversation. Yes?
I very much agree with what Ted said, but I think there's something else that...
Right, so the comment here is whether you work for somebody else or whether you're self-employed is going to have a huge impact on the extent to which you feel like you've got discretion, how much responsibility you have. Although I can tell you, I've had this conversation now literally thousands of times in many different settings, and there's always the sense that, well, if only I had more freedom, if only they would let me do more. And you just fill in the blank as to who they is. It seems to be almost universal. CEOs of, who seem to have all the discretion and authority in the world, same thing. So a big part of what we tried to get at here, and indeed one of the initial motivations at Ford when we started this, was to empower people, was to help them to see that you have the capacity to make change in your world if you're smart about it. If you think about what do you first and foremost, and this is if you take away nothing else, this is the critical idea. You've heard it a million times, but I'll tell you again, you got to know what you care about. And I think that's the hardest thing in life to figure out. What do you care about? What are your values? What's the vision of the kind of world you want to create? But if you start with that, and then you systematically think about who are the critical people around me? What do they expect of me? What do they need from me? And what do I need from them? And you have conversations with them to clarify those expectations, and then continually experiment with better ways of aligning all those factors. You're much more likely to feel a sense of freedom and control and being able to make change that works. But it is different depending on the context, for sure. Let me ask you one more question, and that is, what was it like to talk to somebody else about what you just discussed?
Depressing.
It was depressing. Why was it depressing?
Because you're wishing you had more time for your family or your community. You didn't. That's just
You're not doing well enough.
Yeah.
All right, so it was depressing. Other reactions to what it was like to talk? Yes, ma'am.
You are naturally vulnerable when you reveal yourself.
Yes, you're vulnerable when you reveal yourself. We did this program with junior faculty women at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, funded by the National Institutes of Health. $1 million grant to look at how we could try to change the culture of academic medicine. And that's one of the critical features is in developing a community of support, peer-to-peer mentorships, is this capacity to be open about what really matters. And because that's the only way, of course, that you can address the issues. So yeah, it can be painful and it can be frightening. to be addressing these questions. But what I have found is that when you create the right setting and you make it something that peer-to-peer you're helping each other with, that it's a lot easier for people to address these questions, and they feel good about the opportunity to do that. All right. So a little bit more now on what the idea is and how this, I'm going to give you now just like a 3-minute summary of the whole book. So the idea is to start thinking instead of a one-way point of view in life, like you have to give up everything else in order to be successful in this part, right? That's the scales and balance, the one-way view, where you're doing great in your career, you're getting more responsibility, you're making more money, and you're having more thrills, and then there's something else that's not working. So that's the way most people think about this whole work-life equation. And what I'm asking you to do is to basically put on a different set of lenses and say, all right, where out there in my real world, not fantasy life, but my real world, can I see opportunities to create value for myself, my family, my community, and my business? And what I found is that when you put on those lenses and you look and you have a couple of other people who are helping you to do that, and you're helping them, that you find them. And you're much more likely to pursue them. So that's really the big idea here, is looking for those, what I call four-way wins, and taking what you gather from one part and using it in other parts. How, by being, what you learn from your role as a parent or as a lover or as a friend, how can you take those insights and transfer them into your work? And vice versa. The contacts and connections and other assets that you develop in different parts of your life, how can you use them to good effect in all the different parts? Thinking instead of conflict necessarily, instead looking for harmony. Recognizing that of course there's always sacrifice, there's tragedy and disappointment in all of our lives, and when you actually look at it, it is kind of sad and depressing because life just is filled with disappointment. Of course, but as leaders, your currency is hope and optimism about what's possible. Harmony. And so here's how it goes. Be real, as I said. Be whole, be innovative. And these are the kinds of qualities that we're trying to produce in how we think about ourselves and the leaders that we're trying to develop around us. So again, it starts with a series of exercises that ask people to look at what matters most. So and this is what I do with students and with clients, and it's really quite challenging. Tell the story of the 4 or 5 episodes in your life history that shaped your values. What happened? What impact did that have on you in terms of what you believe is most important in life, what you value, what you're willing to fight for, maybe even die for? What happened? And how did that shape you? It's 15 years from now. What are you doing? What impact are you having on the world? What's the legacy you're creating? So we ask people to write about that. In fact, that's how I start my classes now, is getting the students to stand up in front of the rest of the class and give the 2-minute version of, it's 15 years from now, here's what I'm doing. I wake up, and here's who I'm with, and here's what I do, and here's the impact that I'm having. Not that you have to have a concrete plan laid out, but you do need to have a compelling image of an achievable future. That's what a vision is, a compelling image of an achievable future that inspires you. Because if you don't, you can't lead. It doesn't have to be a concrete plan again. It's an act of imagination. It's a dream that has a realistic element to it because it's got to be achievable. So that's another exercise that we ask people to do and to share with others, and then to give feedback to each other and to coach each other. There's a whole other set of exercises that basically get at the same thing. What do you care about now? Because we know that that's the critical element in all of us, in both leadership and work-life integration. But then we ask people to identify, as you started to do just now, what does it mean to be whole, to recognize the whole person? Well, you think through, who are the critical people? And it's actually not as simple as you might think at first glance. Who matters most to me at work in terms of having a stake in my future? Who matters most to me in my home or my family? Who matters most to me in the community? And what exactly do those people expect of me, and what do I expect of them, and how well am I doing in meeting their expectations, and vice versa? So that's what I call the stakeholder analysis. That's the heart of the middle two chapters of the book, where you think through your life as a kind of system of interdependent performance expectations, which of course it is, except we usually don't think of it that way. And you look to see, where is there conflict among the different people in my life in terms of what they expect of me, how I act when I show up, and what I represent to them in terms of what matters to me. And where is there compatibility? So how is what my mother expects of me consistent with what my students and what my friends expect of me and what I expect of myself? And these are challenging questions, but they get you to see in a more refined and intelligent way where is there opportunity for change that allows me to better align what I care about with what I do. So you think those questions through, and then in the second part of the Be Whole section, you prepare for and then conduct conversations or dialogues with the critical people. So in a concentrated period of time, right now there are a bunch of second-year MBA students who are, as we speak, having stakeholder dialogues, conversations with critical people in their lives, where they're asking the question, here's what I think is important to you, is this accurate? And so you go into, you prepare, you think through, all right, here's what I think this person expects of me, and the conversation then goes something like this. I'm going to come back to you, Ian. So, Ian, you're one of the most important people in my life. This is awkward since we've never met. So just role playing here. And I want to talk with you about how we can strengthen our relationship going forward. Do you have some time for us to do that? Most people that you address with that inquiry, or something like it in words that aren't so awkward, but that make sense to you and to them, most people will feel really good about your telling them that they matter and that you're wanting to talk with them about what they care about. So that's a leadership act in itself, just simply letting people know that they matter to you. That increases trust right there. Free. You just have to say it. But then you go further. And now I've prepared. I've thought through what I think you expect of me. And I say, Ian, here's what I think you expect of me. And I name the 4 things that I think are most important. Do I have it right? And what Ian is likely to do, if he's like most people who do this kind of work, he's likely to say, well, Stu, those first couple things that you mentioned, those are obviously very important to me, and if you hadn't mentioned them, I'd think that there was something really wrong. But the third and fourth things that you mentioned, those actually don't really matter that much to me. What? I've been spending a lot of time worrying and trying to meet those expectations and expending a lot of energy on behalf of that. You're telling me that they don't really matter that much? And I mean, nice, but not critical. Really, tell me why. Why is that important to you? So now I'm just digging in, I'm inquiring, I'm discovering, I'm not defensive here. I'm acting in a leaderful way by inquiring and wanting to know his perspective. I'm taking the leadership leap. I'm putting myself in his head, his heart, and trying to see myself through his eyes. And that's a hard thing to do, and requires a lot of discipline and a lot of practice, and you can never be too good at it. Wow, so those things don't matter so much. Well, is there anything else that really does matter to you? Well, yes, Stu, now that I see that you're asking me, you seem to want to know, I'll tell you. So he tells me this other thing. I hadn't thought about that. Why is that important to you? And et cetera. So I come out of that conversation, I go into that conversation with these 4 things in my head as what I'm trying to do to make him feel good about our relationship. And I come out with those 2 gone and this new one in there. So I come out with this. What does that do to my thinking? How does that change how I see my world and what's possible for me? Think about that. Do you have a thought?
On what's important to the other person, so that you can narrow your focus.
I can narrow my focus and energy to the things that matter more to him. Most of the people in this room probably believe that what other people expect of them, what you carry around in your head, is probably more than what they actually expect of you. I'm going to say that again, and you may not think this is true, but if you don't, go home and try it, because it's almost always true. What you think other people expect of you is probably actually a lot more than what they really expect of you, and probably it's a little different. That's why these dialogues are so critical. But the main thing is that you come away with new knowledge about the reality of your social world, which is what you're operating in as a leader. And so you can create change, and that's what the point of being innovative is all about. Now that you've skilled up, and again, this is just like kind of like learning a new instrument. For most people, it's not a natural way of thinking. So you're just kind of practicing the idea of grounding. What matters most to me? Who are the most important people? What do they expect of me? Getting richer information about those things and then experimenting. Small experiments that are designed to make things better at work, at home, in the community, and for yourself. And when you do that, you get benefits all the way around. So I'm not going to go into the detail of some of the research that we and others have done on the kinds of changes that result. But you know, if you run your company this way, people are going to want to work for you. And they're going to feel more competent about creating change that works for them and for you. And that was our main goal again at Ford, and many other companies are wanting to do the same kind of thing. Get people to feel like they can initiate positive change and overcome the fear, the guilt that inhibits people from trying to make something work for their personal lives. They're afraid to ask. Most people are afraid to come forward to ask for some kind of adjustment in work schedule, in just the nature of the work, because they think that they're going to be told no, or that they're going to be seen as uncommitted. But if you think of it in terms of creating value for your business and for your home and yourself and your community, that you're doing this to serve others, not just yourself, the game changes. And that's really the big shift. And of course, you see all kinds of positive results on the personal side. So we did a study of executive MBA students who took my course before and 4 months after. So these experiments, which I'm not going to have time to go into detail on, but they are all described at the back of the deck. There's all different kinds of things, like trying a new form of delegation, or a new way of taking care of yourself so that you can perform well in all the different parts of your life, or exposing or being more vulnerable about things that matter to you. Maybe it's sharing that leadership vision, or it's focusing on a particular person at a particular time. So a very kind of common experiment would be, I'm going to shut down my digital communication stream for on Tuesday evenings so that I can attend to things that matter otherwise. So let's say you're my boss. What's your name? Lara. What I'd like to try for the next month or so is to shut down on Tuesday evenings. I'm not going to be available unless it's an emergency. Here's how you can contact me, because I think this is going to make me a more productive, healthier, and just a more capable employee. Can we try that for a month and see how it works? And if it doesn't work out, we'll go back to the way things are now, which is, you know, the 24/7 hookup of me to you. Can we try that for a month and see what works? And if not, we'll try something different. So that's kind of how you negotiate it in very, very simple terms. But the idea is, I'm doing this for you and for me. And so here's what we observe, and here's where we're going to have to wrap up. You do a series of experiments. Some of them work, some of them don't. And then you reflect. What worked and what didn't? What do I learn about the process of creating change? Change that is designed to be sustainable because it works for my whole world. So whether or not the experiment works in this laboratory that you create, what you're doing is learning. You're developing practical knowledge that you can then use in all kinds of other ways of thinking and experimenting. Of course, teaching others to do the same. So what do we see after this? It takes about a semester, right? We asked people 4 months later to rate their importance. Again, same exercise you just did. What do you see comparing pre and post here? No change, right? So your values don't shift over a 4-month period. They shift over a decade, perhaps. What does shift? Let's look at the attention people pay. How does that change before and after this process of looking at what it means to be real, to be whole, and then experimenting? It's better lined up, right? So it matches better what matters with what you actually do. How does that happen? What exactly shifts? It's away from work. So this is what we're teaching at Wharton now. Surprise? Why does that make sense? Why is it for many people a really good thing? Ma'am?
When you're more self-aware and you pay more attention to yourself, you're actually more productive
Exactly. So what happens here, you spend more on the other parts, less on work, and many people, when I present this to executive teams, people start to get very nervous at first until you look at some of the other data. So we looked at this deltas in satisfaction, and you can see there's a percentage gain, and these are percentages over a 4-month period. We're now looking at some longer-term impact, but just on the face of it, you can see people are feeling better about all the different parts, particularly the self, which tends to get rated the lowest to begin with, and that's why the gain is the greatest. But you look also at the performance ratings as assessed by the individual, but after talking to their stakeholders. So they talk to them at the beginning, and they talk to them at the end and rate how well I think I'm doing in meeting your expectations. I rate that on a 1 to 10 scale, just as you just did. So we see that here, that's a positive number, as are these. Smaller than these numbers, but still a positive number. So less attention to work, better perceived performance in meeting the expectations of other people at work. That is a paradox, is it not? How do you explain that paradox? You started to. How do you explain the paradox of better performance at work with less attention to it? Yes, so you're more focused on the things that matter. You're pursuing the things that matter most. And that's really the big idea. The rest of the deck tells you more about the kinds of experiments that you might try. You started to talk about that with your discussion partner, for which I'm very grateful that you had that conversation. The big idea, how can you experiment so that you can enrich your life and enrich the lives of the people around you? And that question is something that I hope will resound in conversations beyond this room, and I thank you so much for coming out here this evening and for being a part of the amazing Wharton community. Thanks so much. All right. Thank you.